Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the 817 podcast. I am your co-host, Jimmy, here with EJ, and funny enough, this is the second time we are recording this episode this week because we recorded on Tuesday because things weren't going to line up for this weekend when we normally record, and honestly, everything we talked about on Tuesday became like irrelevant by Friday. We were like, you know what? We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. So we're back here on Sunday night to record another episode for this week.
It's 8 p.m. on Sunday night. I would argue maybe the latest and closest to the fire show that we've ever done because we always drop on Monday. So we're going to get the freshest, hottest updates on the lovely city of Fort Worth. We talk about trends, culture, business. But right now, the big story, of course, is going to be Arron Dean's trial and the verdict being manslaughter and what's next for our city as Monday rolls around and the jury goes to decide on length of time. And I don't know how long that process takes. Clearly, you and I thought the process to get to a verdict was going to be longer because we showed up on Tuesday when we shouldn't have wasted our time. But no worries, we're going to be better for you guys today.
And like always...
Did you miss us, by the way? It's been like, what, 3 weeks?
No, we did last week.
Holy smokes. We really did last week?
Yeah.
What was last week's about?
I
was in Mexico.
Oh, no, this is the first one. Wow, okay, it's been wow.
It's been like 3 weeks since we've done a live episode. I know that Tuesday makes it feel like, and we have the interview that's coming out next.
So clearly we have no sense of time. Well, thanks for sticking with us. Like always, we are going to dive in with some short stories. Then we'll get to the big story, which is the Arron Dean manslaughter verdict, and then finish with our losses and wins. Our short stories this week are going to focus a lot around the last city council meeting of the year, which was last Tuesday. And there were a number of things that we thought were worth highlighting. Do you want to start?
Yeah, so the first one that we all kind of saw coming was the selling the Central Library on 500 West 3rd Street. That was the large, amazing-looking building in the city. We sold it for $18 million to Dart Interest LLC. Jimmy, what's your kind of take on the sell and how you feel about it?
I mean, I love that building. I think libraries are obviously an incredibly important space in any city, in any community. I do understand the line of thinking that they are trying to spread library resources more around the city and into neighborhoods, which, being the benefactor of the children's library being in our neighborhood over here in Meadowbrook, like I totally see that. I think it is also an indictment of how we have zoned downtown Sundance Square to make it pretty unlivable, where there's not really apartment complexes in that area. So I hope they keep the facade of the building. It is part of the sale is that it has to be developed as multifamily and mixed use, which I think is more of what that area needs. So it does excite me that like that is something that they are baking into this contract and into this sale, because I think it's a really important step in the development of downtown. And, you know, the library's presence there isn't going away. They're talking about moving to a smaller footprint. That building is massive, so it makes sense. So I do hope that, one, they keep the facade. Two, I am excited that it's going to be developed as multifamily.
Yeah, and it seems like the executive director kind of leading the library facilities in Fort Worth was really gung-ho about, hey, we are not a centralized, dense city, which is unfortunate. But because of that, we have to use a different strategy than most cities and pit different libraries in different locations, like the one we have down the street. We also have one across the highway, which the one that I go to because I don't have a child. But
yeah, there's one in historic Southside right next to the community center.
Yeah. So it seems the strategy is sprawl rather than dense central location that people come to. I know the other big thing on the city council agenda was, among the 19 zoning cases, they unanimously approved plans to build more apartments in Montgomery Plaza, while at the same time, council approved a plan that would amend the design guidelines, land use, and form base code for development in the Fort Worth stockyards. A fancy way of saying no mixed use in the stockyards area. This has been a conversation on the pod several times, but also seems to be getting more weight in the news. There's a big story in the Fort Worth report. As you know, Carlos Flores' district is the Fort Worth Stockyards area. Elizabeth Beck is the Montgomery Plaza. What is kind of your understanding of the story and I guess the zig and zag of it being that, man, okay, you do it in one place, but the other place, why not?
Yeah, it's pretty funny, honestly, to I'm not surprised, but I wish that somebody would have like pointed out the irony in like the decisions right here, because they are polar opposite in terms of how we choose to develop downtown Fort Worth and all of the little nooks and crannies of it. So basically now in the stockyards, they will not allow any multifamily development. Quote from Chris Nettles, some of the things that I heard tonight in the meeting: we'd like multifamily, but not in my backyard. That's honestly something that we heard from neighbors in Linwood a couple years ago in relation to affordable housing in the West 7th area. But it just continues to hammer down this idea that the stockyards are not being developed for locals. They're not a place where you live, you work, you play. They are, you go out of your way to bring your out-of-town friends down here, so we know we're going to get you like maybe once a year, but we're more focused on just churning out tourists. We're not really focused on trying to make better traffic flow, improve road design. We are just going to, churn out our 8 million annual visitors. And if, you come down once a year, once every 2 years as a local, that's fine with us.
Yeah. I mean, the one positive of the stockyard story is, thank God it's not actually interwoven in the downtown area, where you have seen several cities be ruined because of that. San Antonio is a great example with the Riverwalk, where you have to get off the Riverwalk to not feel like you're in, what it feels like in Arlington Six Flags area.
Yeah.
That's literally what it feels like on the San Antonio boardwalk.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's one benefit. And like you just said, 2 visits. You're right. I think when you and I have a visitor, we still go to the stockyards. They know that's going to bring locals at least once or twice. Yeah. But the other take here on the Montgomery Plaza stuff, though, is this decision really made for locals, or is it made for the growth of Fort Worth in the sense of the new residents, like new people showing up? Because I'm be honest with you, I've lived here since 2017 and not once, and maybe I just have no friends, but I have not once been invited to one of the apartment complex in the Montgomery Plaza. I've never dropped anyone off at anywhere in the Montgomery Plaza. But, kind of giving you guys bonus information before it comes out. We interviewed Carlo Capua, the Chief Innovation Officer for Fort Worth ISD. He will be the last episode of the year talking about what's next for Fort Worth in 2023 and beyond. Really exciting interview to end the year. But he did say that we're getting 20,000 new residents every year. So to me, all of this, moving Five Below, Michael's Office Depot, and PetSmart to build 595 resident units seems the strategy to the new growth. So it's not even like you got tourists, you got locals, you got new residents.
Yeah, but it is at least trying to cater to people who live here full time.
Yeah, yeah.
Like to people who spend 80% of their paychecks in the city as opposed to 1%.
Yeah.
So I do know people that we know one person that lives in the actual like nice lofts. We've never gone in. But working at Amazon, I did know people that lived in like I think it's called White Buffalo, the like West actual like Crockett Row ones.
Yeah, that area I know people live in.
Yeah.
But like Browery or Bro, like the one like.
Oh,
like,
I do. The ones like behind Tom Thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know some people that live in there, but they are people that moved here more recently.
Yeah.
So I do think it does show. I mean, you can really clearly see the two opposing visions of like Ann Zeta laid a lot of groundwork, and now Elizabeth Beck is following through on a lot of the like road design. I mean, honestly, White Settlement Bridge reopening last year plays a big role in traffic flow. And with the continued use of the dash, like West 7th is set up to be a dense multimodal area where we're seeing the, stockyards. You're coming from the airport, you're getting dropped off in an Uber, or you rented a car, you're staying at the hotel, you're going to walk around for a day, maybe two.
Buy a cowboy hat.
Yeah, buy a cowboy hat, maybe buy a, cow skin rug or something, head back to the airport, and, that's your impression of Fort Worth.
Yeah, no, I mean, man, so do you enjoy being around the Montgomery Plaza area, though? Which I'm not saying I don't or do. I'm trying to figure out, because like what still freaks me out is the bridge. And what's cool about since White Settlement Bridge, you now are able to just go around the backside.
Yeah.
And that has made it so much more enjoyable to get to Hatsuyuki, or Doc's Records, or wherever you're going, Target. Because a part of me feels like Montgomery Plaza has also been corporatized, I guess, in a way.
Oh, for sure. And you can tell by how many brands struggle to stay in there.
Yeah.
Like that one corner. I mean, really like that entire back corner by where like Chick-fil-A is. I feel like that restaurant turns over every year. I mean, they haven't had anybody in there for 3 years now. But I think that's like the potential problem that we've had with a lot of the West 7th area is that it has been so tough to get into that locals that don't live there are like, nah, like, is it worth the effort for me to go to somewhere in Crockett Row, like to the food hall, or to go somewhere in Montgomery Plaza? Maybe not. But now that like West 7th's getting finished, White Settlement Bridge is open, so that's gotten a lot easier. I mean, even like Birdies, they did a really good job redeveloping Lola's. You can see like the vision of how they're trying to get back to there.
Yeah, I feel like if you could switch, I don't know the building called where Sweet Greens is and HE Supply Co. Like that, if you could switch all those stores and move into Montgomery Plaza and then move out Payway and Bahama Bucks.
Pi 5.
Yeah. Like, I think it would be a very fire area.
Yeah.
Because weirdly about all the good, like all that weird new, I call it the, like, the San Francisco's coming. Like all that new stuff is, I don't know how, do people walk to that area? Because I never in the TCU area. Do people actually, I feel like you got to get to a car to get over to HE Supply.
Sure, yeah.
But like all that stuff, if that was in Montgomery Plaza, I feel like that would be a win-win for both those stores and the people who are trying to live dense, but still not go to, Payway.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of queen of organizing Fort Worth projects miserably, we got Kay Granger actually gaining more power, not in the city of Fort Worth, but nationally. Fort Worth Republican will contend with conservative policy demands due to her new position as the head of House Appropriations Committee, a position from which she can influence national policy debates and advocate for Texas interests. But controlling those federal purse strings isn't all what Dallas Morning News has quoted, puppies and rainbows. We have an expert here out of Georgetown, Matthew Glassman, says it's going to be a huge headache to be appropriations chair. You're caught in a set of modern dynamics that have made running that committee difficult. This committee also is responsible of keeping the lights on for the government when we always get down to around this time, which is interesting. I haven't heard a lot of news around this time. You think like usually we're like freaking out.
They did it like a month ago, maybe 2 months.
So we're good.
Yeah.
So this
until whenever. Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually she'll have to have that responsibility of keeping the lights on and making sure that the government still runs. But a lot of people see the value of this in Fort Worth as well. Panther City, Panther Island project. Could there be something there that we get funds from? But there's mainly this article talks about the benefits coming from our Lockheed Martin, Arbel, who gets federal contracts and military contracts. It seems like they are really excited to have her with this power. I know we read the story when we're here Tuesday. This is probably the only story that's still relevant. What is your take from it?
It's definitely significant that someone like Kay Granger is now the head of the Appropriations Committee. She served on this committee for a while. Now that Republicans are taking over the House in January, she, being in the majority party, now gets to chair that committee. Even when Republicans were in charge of this committee while she has been in Congress and was sitting on it, it didn't really help us with Panther Island very much. But like you said, especially on the defense contracts, like where are we sending money to build these F-15s, F-35s, whatever helicopters, that's definitely something that I think Fort Worth will see the influence and benefit from. But it also kind of puts her in a little more of a accountability position, I should say, where like if things aren't getting done the right way, are the extremists that we, have had vote Tim O'Hare into office here, like, are they still going to accept her next time she's up for a re-election if she can't live up to that bar for them? So definitely a precarious position for her to be in, but hopefully it is something that benefits Fort Worth in the long run.
Yeah, she doesn't, if Biden or a Democrat's going to be president, this is trying to freeze the government is a great strategy from the crazy right. So her being, not as crazy, you're right. Like, does she have to fold? What was that experience? It's interesting. Do we have any quotes from her in this last election cycle around the Tim O'Hare's? I actually think she's been relatively quiet. And
I was gonna say, do we have any quotes from her like ever? But that's honestly the life of a House member. Is
Betsy Price is writing letters still, and she's not even having any power.
Yeah, but it's like if you're smart, you fly under the radar. Once you get elected once, it's a lot easier to keep getting elected, and that's what Kate Granger is good at.
Yeah.
Well, but, I mean, she, voted to overturn the election. Or no, she didn't show up to that vote. But then afterwards, she said, well, I would not have voted to certify the election. So we know where she has stuck her flag.
Wow. Yeah, that's weird. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the big story. Go ahead and you kind of just bring us into it. The big story is obviously the Arron Dean trial. We've had national news here in Fort Worth. But let's try to, my biggest regret of me and you being gone, enjoying our lives and not doing the 817 podcast is we were gone, during all of this, the trial stuff, with Arron Dean. So what is your take now that we have a verdict, and like, what are you thinking about as we, on Monday have them starting the discussion on timeline, what is actually, going to be sentenced?
Yeah, so it was honestly a quick trial and a pretty quick deliberation. It really only lasted a few days between prosecution, defense, and final remarks. And I think that was a crucial strategy on both sides, where the prosecution wanted to, keep the main thing, and that's that Arron Dean entered Atatiana Jefferson's backyard, did not follow Fort Worth police protocols, did not give opportunity for Atatiana to respond to the situation, and then shot and killed her in her home. And the defense, was trying to argue self-defense, but I think you could largely see that so much of the process was laid out of he did not follow any of the steps, any of the protocol. He gave less than a second between saying Fort Worth police and shooting her when there's no...
I don't even think it was Fort Worth police. Wasn't it hands up?
Yes. Yeah, just hands up. Yeah. We don't know if she actually had a gun. There's no...
She laid for a minute with no
CPR.
Yeah.
No calling for backup. And then sentencing, or the verdict came out on the 15th around 2:30 p.m. So the jury really didn't even deliberate for that long either, and it had to be unanimous, and he was found guilty of manslaughter, which is an important distinction, that it was manslaughter and not murder. Manslaughter carries a lesser sentencing, and murder is much harder to prove. You have to prove that it was premeditated, that you were going out of your way to do this. So I think I was personally a little bit shocked, just because my expectations on cases like this have come to be very low. But at the end of the day, I think manslaughter is probably the most likely outcome that we would have gotten walking into the trial unbiasedly. Yeah.
No, I think you hear a lot of Fort Worth feeling confident that there's a soul in the city. There is, obviously, people wanting to fight for murder. We're wanting to fight for murder. One of the short stories that we kind of just adding to the big stories is Nettles. This city council member was fighting for. He's upset because he wanted murder. His community wanted murder. The best part, kudos to the Fort Worth report starting the healing process. Arron Dean's guilty of manslaughter story. There's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reporters working on this one story. So you can just see the amount of thoughtfulness and work they put into it. But what I really liked about it, there was a part here where they talked to an expert. I don't like using that word without saying who this was, but he basically mentioned that it's really, like you said, really hard to see murder, and that this was the most likely outcome. The scary part of this individual's, expert advice on the story was that he's like, I'm expecting 5 to 10 years case. And that to me is where that would be very unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because manslaughter's 2 to 20.
Yeah. Manslaughter's 2 to 20. I would think that this falls on the more egregious side of manslaughter. But we'll have to see if the jury feels that way. And I think also, one of the major stories coming into the trial was that it's an all-white jury. The very first thing they asked during jury selection was have you heard about the case of Arron Dean and Atatiana Jefferson? Only 50% of people raised their hands, and that 50% were,
which is a whole, debacle in its own case.
Yeah, and so now we're left with,
and there were some people of color. It just were no black people in the jury or the substitutes.
Yes. So now we're left with a jury that doesn't have anyone from the black community in it, and we're left with a jury that is clearly very out of touch.
Yeah.
Like, has no clue what is going on. So it was definitely kind of feeling like a loose cannon of what's going to happen. I think had our expectations lower walking in as well.
Think about that. Like, we even talked about this on Tuesday, was just like, we're definitely in the top 1 percentile of consuming the news. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the top 5 to 15%. And so this idea of there's people who's walking around in the 817 who had no idea what a Atatiana Jefferson was or Arron Dean was. And like, that is crazy. And then like, that shows the annoyance part and why the system's broken is like, of course, black people are going to know about the situation, especially when it happened in their community. And so you then end up not selecting any black people on the jury. And that's, we talk about representation and the need for representation. Like, I feel like you have to, maybe a new thing that law needs to have is that your jury has to reflect the demographics of your city. So that means if 20% is black, 2% is Vietnamese, whatever the thing is, you have to have a jury. And so it makes it longer and harder. But like, to end up in a space where there was no black people on the jury is crazy. But the fact that one of every 2 people who were selected to be on the jury didn't even know what this was is, like you said, even more crazy.
Yeah.
And this, my loss is going to be the Star Telegram stuff, but this even goes to like, man, like, we have local journalism, we have media, and people don't know about this. It's like, if right now with our local journalists on strike, we really weren't getting the strongest stories from Star Telegram around this very important thing. And in fact, for like Arron Dean's camp, this was a very good time to have a trial.
Yeah.
Because our expert local journalists from the Star Telegram were, on strike. So for their own issues. So like, a lot of the things that, the psychology story came up in the Dallas Morning News, first. So it's just like, if we don't have journalism, what's that number? It's 50% today didn't know about Atatiana Jefferson or Arron Dean. What's that number again without local journalism 4 years from now? 70, 80? It's just crazy that we undervalue the importance of getting news out locally about stuff like this to our people.
Yeah. One thing that this story also brought to light, and speaking about how we don't have any quotes from Kay Granger, a U.S. House Rep Mark Veazey called on the Tarrant County District Attorney and City of Fort Worth to take action. It's time for the City of Fort Worth to create a civilian police review board that boosts transparency and accountability. That was something that got recommended to us back in 2017. Last month, City Council voted 5-4 against creating that same board. And having this trial happen continues to bring to light that Fort Worth has ignored everything, essentially, that we were recommended to do by the Race and Culture Task Force. And that's just not a great foundation to be starting on when we talk about trying to build an equitable city.
Yeah. And the ultimate issue with this, too, though, is that when things like this do pass, the Fort Worth Police Association just throw a hissy fit and they just make it so difficult to play nice with the people. And they act like brats and cry about it.
And start lining the pockets of the people that they need to make sure that it's not something that actually affects them.
Yeah. It's, and something I said last time was, talking about the ghost of Jim Lane, the former Fort Worth council member and longtime attorney, known for defending police officers and soldiers accused of misconduct, and Arron Dean was one of his clients. He has been a mega supporter of the stockyards, of cowboy culture. And so you guys hear us always dog Cowtown and stockyards, but it's really the conservative underline that you don't just see in stockyards, but you see in our city, in our justice system, where a guy like this, not only when passes away, he gets front page stories for being such an influential cultivator. And Maddie Parker has a lot more to say about Jim than this case. And that is the underlines. And you see the VCs and the Nettles at least trying, unsuccessfully, but doing enough showmanship on their side so their people still give them a thumbs up. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, though, Parker did say something. You want to go into that?
And talking about Mayor Parker and Councilman Chris Nettles, both are facing contempt of court hearings for their public comments after the Dean verdict. So basically, the two of them were called as witnesses at some point during the interviewing process of in a 2021 pretrial hearing, and the previous judge on the case placed them under a gag order issued on October 25th, 2019, which limited pretrial comment by attorneys and others connected closely to the case. That order extended to the council members when they were sworn in as witnesses. So both of them released a statement after the verdict, and I think they technically had to wait until after the sentencing is done. And so both will attend a show cause hearing at noon on January 4th. Basically, they have to explain why they made their comments, why they should not be found in contempt of court. If they are found in contempt of court, it's going to be a small fine. They're not going to get jail time over this.
And that's my other thing is, going to, now today, I guess, listening to this, they're going to decide at the sentencing. I am unaware how fast this goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it going to go as fast as everything else? Are me and you going to be sitting here on Christmas on Sunday and having to talk about something? I don't know how this works. But what I do believe is what needs to be adjusted is, like, if these experts are saying 5 to 10, I know damn well there are some people of color who are sitting in our jail systems who have done a lot less, who are sitting for more or equivalent. And so I want you to put Arron Dean's trial next to every person who's doing 10 or more, and stop when you find someone's like, he's more than that. And if they're 15 for who knows what, stealing a thing, robbery, something, but not taking a life.
Yeah.
That needs to be the reflection on what this guy gets. Unfortunately, like you said, who knows who's doing this jury. Even in the Dallas story, the morning news story, they were saying how the expert was saying how it seems like there was people who were for Dean and for the defense, and they both just met in the middle and said manslaughter. That seems like what was the thing that happened. I hope they don't go that fast this come around, but maybe they do because of the holidays. I don't know how all that works. Yeah. I don't want to come back.
True. Like, these jury members are average people who have been, off of work to be on this jury. They haven't been able to prep for the holidays like you would expect them to. And maybe that's another thing that kind of plays into the defense continuing to postpone this, continuing to ask for new judges, et cetera, et cetera. Because now, you get to the week of Christmas, these guys are going to get in there. They probably already talked about it some beforehand, so they can just, get in and get out.
But if they say 5, because,
and I really do understand Chris Nettles' sentiment that, has justice been served? Because, like you said, there are people in the Fort Worth incarceration system who have done significantly less
and has more than 10
that are serving way worse times.
To me, it got to be at the top, 15 to 20. That's where I'm like, holy snaps. Fort Worth really is trying to leave the ghost of Jim Lane. Like, holy snaps. But if it's 5 to 10, we're playing in this system of inequality at its bar. And so kudos. And I do, what Nettle said is we've been waiting for 1,160 days for justice to be served, and yet justice still hasn't been served. This verdict is a slap in the face to the black community in Fort Worth and across the country. This verdict says that a white man can murder a black woman in her own home with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Literally.
And I disagree that 5 to 10 years is a slap on the wrist, right?
Yeah.
That is a life-changing sentence in terms of much that you are going to
at 38 years old.
At 38 years old. So I don't think that is necessarily I would not. A slap on the wrist is you getting a little fine for contempt of court,
Yeah.
But I think to me, the more frustrating thing is at 38, let's say he gets 10, he comes out at 48. He still has cop experience. He's not going to get hired in Fort Worth, but there's plenty of counties and police departments in the area that will take him on when he gets out. And so that's maybe the more even infuriating thing to me is that, yeah, this guy's going to miss out on maybe a decade or more of living life, but he took tons of decades from Atatiana Jefferson. Yeah, from Atatiana Jefferson. And when he gets out, that South Lake, somewhere in Collin County, they'll be ready to hire him.
Yeah. I mean, someone, who knows, might want to bring him on their political trail, like they did the young kid from Kenosha, whatever, and I don't, and again, when you look at this psychologist who talked and said he is not fit to be a police officer, and then he went to rebuttal and got a new group of people to say that he's okay. I didn't watch the TV around him. I don't know Arron Dean's personality. I don't know if he in his basement has a bunch of MAGA stuff and he's a super politically entwined person, or is he one of the other 50% of people who just has a job as a cop, and a masculinity issue like a lot of cops do. I don't know his his political affiliation as tied to it, but it is interesting. And you talk about taking 10 years. He took a long time from a 28-year-old black lady who was doing everything right, literally the impossible, to make things happen. Her dream of becoming a doctor, a bachelor's of science in biology. We're talking someone who was doing the thing and came home to help her mom and her sister, and true high performer, and just like that. So it's not just life, it's truly generational impact that she was going to make on her family. The person to buy the next house, the person to save that money, the person to do that thing, and the generational ramifications. Yeah, 5 to 10 can't be it. But we'll see what happens, and we'll see how fast it happens.
Yeah,
along the way. And shout out to everyone who's just been on top of it and allowing to inform us, as my Star Telegram's account doesn't work anymore. So kudos to the Fort Worth Report and everyone else who's fitting in. You want to go to wins and losses?
Yeah, my loss, this was something that was supposed to come up at City Council this week, but kind of got knocked off the docket, and that is that City Council has decided not to do anything about short-term rentals in Fort Worth. And my loss with it is just after all this debate, seeing that nobody is happy with the current situation, you are making zero people happy with the current setup. You are missing out on opportunities for, both sides of things, just to say, you know what, we're gonna stick with what we've got. We're not gonna, expand code compliance to help get things in line. We're not going to provide framework that allows us to collect occupancy taxes on these. Make a decision, have a backbone. That is, whenever we would have Dr. Ferris on, and she would just be like, I just want there to be some debate in these city council meetings. Like, I want them to argue a little bit. I want them to disagree. Like, make a decision. And that's my loss, is that we're just going to continue. This, honestly, like the Fort Worth way is to, continue in this sort of cycle. Let's be nice. Let's just sort of go with the flow. The
second option, if we're not nice, we just copy Dallas. And Dallas, after years of debate, came up a decision. Dallas City Plan Commission members voted 9-4 on Thursday, earlier in December, that short-term rental should be defined as lodging. And they made in a 9-hour meeting discussion on what qualifies and doesn't in areas in the city of Dallas. So you're right, we're on ice here. And I totally see your loss, but it is a complicated. We kind of talked about how we don't, we tell them to make a decision, but at the same time, you and I'm not sure if I'm pro short-term rental in places and how and all that. Like it's just, I've learned a lot along of the guests that we've had along the way. So it is tough. Yeah.
It's not to minimize it, but it is like, we've been talking about this for 8 or 9 months after having put off this conversation for 5 years.
Yeah.
And you're just going to come to it and say, I don't know. That just feels a little bit old school to me.
Yeah.
Something we should be getting away from.
Well, speaking of old school, my loss is the McClatchy and the Star Telegram, and how old school their management process is of a news outlet. As for the last month now, Star Telegram reporters have been on strike. Last week on Wednesday, they finally had, I think, a second conversation with McClatchy after a first one kind of got,
fell through.
Yeah, it wasn't really
we
serious.
Got lunch plans.
They spent 3 hours debating, and then they gave him like a slap. Said we didn't care. But my loss is just Star Telegram and how and honestly, every city council member here who is not saying anything about the importance of journalism and the importance of having a actual local journalist who knows what's going on in a city, so that not every 2 years we have a new set of people who don't know what's going on. I know as people in power, journalists frustrate you and probably are annoying, but as city officials and people who know stewards of what's right for the people of Fort Worth, good local journalism. So I think my loss.
And as people who also asked for a raise this year.
Yeah, exactly. So no, a loss is to McClatchy for not doing anything. My loss is to city officials who have not stand up and wrote letters. The only person I saw was Ramon Romero. He wrote a letter. But I did get some insight that Wednesday meeting could have been close to a decision, which to go from nothing to close, I'm interested to see what happens today.
Yeah.
But my thoughts and worries is that McClatchy won't really feel the sweat until 90, 120 days out, maybe even 2 quarters, of having to pay for scab reporters and people starting to see their quality go down and starting to leave the newspaper. But I just don't think our journalists, when you get paid $45,000 a year, has the runway to strike for 2 quarters. So, but thank you for being bold and courageous and trying.
Yeah. My win is something we've talked about before, that has a next step, and that is that the potential high-speed rail that would connect Dallas to Fort Worth to other major cities all over Texas, it is moving forward with an environmental study. You know what? The study's going to take a year. I don't know if I will be alive to see this ever get built, but the fact that we are taking another step and not just shutting it down, I'm going to have be my win.
Yeah. Who knows? Me and you will be able to take the rail when we're Kate Granger's age to the Panther Island when it's done on the red ribbon cutting at 83. And will we finally get all the projects done when we're about to be done with our lives? My win is I was very not around Fort Worth for the last 6 weeks, but when I got to attend the Techstars event. The Public Health Techstars Accelerator. Fort Worth was the largest city without an accelerator. Techstars came in with the UNT Health Science Center, did the first accelerator where we had startups with innovative ideas doing really cool stuff from different tools, products, apps to focus on helping people be their well-being. Really cool stuff. It was really aspiring. So my win is not just that. It's just the one thing that Maddie and the city council today can walk around with a WWE belt with is the economic growth of Fort Worth, the strategy. You have the Techstars. Samsung just came in here, and they're moving south of the city with a huge facility.
Yeah, like 600,000 square feet.
Yeah, Samsung. Who won the Bell Helicopter won the billions of dollar contract with the government. That's projected to be 60 to 90 million's lifetime value of a contract. So my win, the economic piece. But like we've said in multiple episodes, are we building a house on a poor foundation? Only time will tell.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. Next week, we have an interview dropping that EJ talked about with Carlo Capua, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the city of Fort Worth. So we are really excited. That'll drop on the 26th. We hope you enjoy.
It's an awesome interview.
Yeah, it's a great interview. And then we'll be back with a normal episode on
crypto,
the 2nd.
We talk. I mean, he brought up the metaverse. I mean, he brought up all the crazy stuff.
Yeah, he was going all over the place with it.
Yeah. Well, happy holidays, everyone. Be great. Jimmy, thank you for coming back on Sunday for we could rally and give people a good episode. I feel like we got a good one here.
Yeah.
Hope you guys feel that way. Share with a friend. Glad to see you back. And let's keep caring about this lovely city. Peace, everyone.
Happy holidays.